I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Lane County Board of Commissioners back to order. It is Tuesday, March 13th, 2018, and this is our afternoon session. And we have our first item of the afternoon is 12A, the second reading and public hearing for ordinance number 18-02 in the matter of amending Lane Code Chapter 14 and to add, revise, and delete definitions and provisions to modernize and update the entire chapter, amending Lane Code Chapters 10, 13, and 16 to update references, definitions, and provisions for consistency with Lane Code Chapter 14 and adopting a severability clause. File number 509PA1605492, and we have Amber Bell here.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Today we are bringing before you the Lane Code Chapter 14 Modernization Project. In this proposal, we are proposing to replace Lane Code Chapter 14 in its entirety and then also update references in Lane Code Chapter 10, 13, and 16 to Chapter 14. In general, the proposed amendments are intended to provide a more modern code format, enhance the user experience, make it more readable by using bolding and white space, also to include missing and incomplete procedures for type 1 or ministerial applications, and for type 4 legislative plan amendment or quasi-judicial plan amendment and or land use regulation proposals. Also, we're proposing to update state law references and clarify timelines for processing applications and appeals. A comprehensive analysis of the proposed revisions is included in your packet. I'd like to just summarize some of the major revisions for the purpose of this staff report. In 14020 in the draft that's before you, we've added some language to clarify processes for submitting materials. So for example, we have clarified that for paper application and appeal and electronic application and appeal submittals that are over 5 pages, an applicant would need, or appellant for that matter, would need to submit both. Electronic and paper submittals, and those would be due by end of business, which we've added a definition of end of business to be 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. In 14030, we've added type 1 through 4 terminology, so those are the types of land use applications that one can propose. In 14040, we're proposing a modification of application procedure, and that would be where an applicant, after an application's been deemed complete, request a modification or revision to a site plan or their written materials that's substantial, that would warrant either new notice or a new hearing. And so in that instance, we're proposing to require an application form, a timeline extension, and a fee prior to processing that type of revision. And then for an application revision that exceeds that involves a new use or new criteria, that would require a new application. We are also proposing language that would restrict the ability to supplement an application within the first 30 days completeness review. So that would be where, we just receive an application form, we receive additional materials before we're able to complete the review of whether an application is complete or incomplete. So what we're proposing is that those materials would not be reviewed until the completeness review is sent to the applicant. In 14060, referral notice, there are certain instances where state law requires pre-notice, what we commonly refer to today as referral notice and opportunity to comment. In the draft, it's referred to as notice of application. And so we were proposing to require notice of application where state law explicitly requires it, but for all other instances, that would be optional. So we could provide that, if the application warrants it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be required. In all instances, notice of decision would still be sent, however. Also for posted notice, currently staff provides posted notice for zone changes and telecommunication towers and also plan amendments, and we're proposing that the applicant would post the notice and provide an affidavit of posting and then remove it within 14 days lawfully. In 14080, that's the appeals section, we've proposed some limited revisions to the elect not to hear process. So that's mostly the same as the current language in Lane Code Chapter 14, consistent with the board's direction on February 27th to place the elect not to hear appeals on the consent calendar. We have proposed to add some language stating that the board would elect to ratify and affirm the decision of the hearing's official interpretations therein. So the board would have that option to include that ratification language to affirm the decision in instances where retaining local deference would be appropriate. And it would also retain the ability for the board to remain silent on certain appeals. And then, of course, the board would always have the option of pulling the item and electing to hold an on-the-record hearing if they so determined. In 14090, at the January 23rd board work session, the board provided us with policy direction to remove some of the stipulations for revocation or suspension of a decision that was made in error. And so that included considerations like permitting costs, and what we understood was that these considerations should be addressed outside of the land use process. So we've gone ahead and deleted those stipulations. And then in 14100, we've added LUBA remand procedures. We have received comments, which we have distributed to the commissioners. Two sets of comments, one from Land Watch Lane County that was received yesterday on March 12th, and the other set of comments from the Law Office of Bill Close. Staff have not had the opportunity yet to fully review both sets of comments. They were just recently received within the last day. We would recommend that the board continue the hearing so that we would have the opportunity to fully review the comments, and also for the reason that staff have identified the need for a few technical revisions to the draft. So we would like to recommend that the board set a continued time and date certain hearing so that we could return with those revisions and then also fully respond to the comments.
Do you have a proposed date for the?
April 10th would be the earliest date that we could return.
Is that the end of your presentation?
Yes, that concludes my presentation, but I'm available to answer any questions.
You want to continue the public hearing? Is that correct? Yeah.
Any questions for staff before we open the public hearing?
Just one question.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One question I had, so the questions that the comments we received from Mr. Malone and Mr. Close, do you know if these comments were also provided when the Planning Commission met, or are they just now being provided right now?
So neither party commented before the Planning Commission. This is the first time that we've received comments from both Land Watch and the Law Office of Bill Close.
And we don't know why, I'm sure. So it seems like the Planning Commission would be the appropriate, but that's okay. So, all right, thank you.
I'll just add, Commissioner, that I want to point out that staff has done a very thorough outreach effort with this project going back over a year, and we've solicited comments, and we have received comments from other parties, but it is common for, as you well know, for comments to be dropped the day of a hearing. So,
yeah.
Yes, it is.
I'll also point out that you all have made revisions to the proposal since the Lane County Planning Commission, so these comments could be relative to those
correct.
revisions also. So it is appropriate to be getting comments at this time. I don't want to say that we don't.
Oh, I'm not saying that.
I don't want to discourage people from the public process. So any other questions for staff before I open the public hearing? So I will open the public hearing on ordinance number 1802. Is anyone signed up to speak? Devin? Sorry, hang on while Devin brings me the sign-up sheet. And we have Mike Evans signed up to speak. So, Mike, if you come state your name for the record and place of business, and then we can make your comment.
Commissioners, my name is,
I'm sorry, if I can interrupt real quick. Sorry, Mike. I think I wasn't paying too close attention. I think the board chair needs to read through the script that was provided for the hearing so that we go through the disclaimer of bias and that sort of thing, if you've got that there, before we carry on with the hearing.
Well, not having the script, that's what got skipped.
Do we have that?
Yeah,
I apologize. We do not have it printed before us.
Well, is there a need for that, given that it's an ordinance?
I wasn't quite, this isn't a quasi-judicial procedure.
It's not,
Yeah.
no. I think it's at least appropriate.
It is land use, but we're not doing a land use decision.
Right. No, I think it's at least appropriate to run through whether there's any bias or conflict of interest on the board members before the hearing starts.
Okay.
That's probably covers this.
So before we go to the actual public testimony for the public hearing, I will ask the board if anyone has any conflicts or interest or bias or other declarations they want to make. Commissioner Sorensen?
I have none.
Commissioner Lykin?
None.
Commissioner Williams?
None.
Commissioner Farr?
I have none.
And I have none. So is that,
I think that covers the important part of it.
thank you.
I have a script if it would work. I don't know.
Yeah.
Probably specific to this.
Yeah. I have script. I could probably go back and find a script from an older one, but yeah, I was not provided one for this afternoon, so.
Yeah, I think for legislative hearings like this, we just need to cover the bias and conflict stuff is the most important.
Great. So back to the hearing and calling our one signed up person, Mr. Evans.
that means I have more than 3 minutes, right?
No, the clock's been running.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been running, sorry. My name is Mike Evans. I'm a land use consultant in Springfield, Oregon. And good afternoon, commissioners, staff. And I agree with staff that there's a tremendous amount of work that's been put forth on this project, both by staff and Planning Commission. One of the commissioners, Planning Commissioner members, indicated that it had been 30, 35, 40 years, whatever, since the code had been rewritten or looked at as a whole package, and we ought not to rush through it at this point, make sure we do it right in case it's not looked at for another 30 years. And I think they did that to a large extent. There are a few, I did participate. I have to admit that chapter 14 is one of the most difficult ones to understand and get a grasp on, unless you're really in the practice of dealing with lane code on a regular basis. But there are a few items, and I participated to a certain extent during that process. Some things have changed since then. They're new, and now they're kind of, thanks to the Planning Commission and staff, most issues have been lined out so we can pick out issues that I think are important and I think still need to be looked at. And I'm glad that the staff recommended continuation, because I think that's important for you guys to get a thorough grasp on some of these things that have been brought up by Landwatch, Bill Close, and a couple comments that I'm going to make. One of the issues that I just saw today that Landwatch brings up is one that I had on my agenda, and I had submitted some information previously on this. In the farm and forest zones, the dwelling approvals, I think it's just dwelling approvals, are maybe some others, but they're valid for 4 years, and then there's a provision for a 2-year extension. Lane County in practice has a section of Lane Code Chapter 14 itself that provides for an additional 1-year extension, provided the criteria for approval haven't been changed. The way the code reads right now, and I think Landwatch is taking the position that lane code, because that additional 1-year extension is not contained in the administrative rule, that it isn't allowed. and Lane County has been doing that. I would hope that they continue to do that. It's a very critical issue to the population out there who happen to hold these permits and for whatever reason need to have them continued on a regular basis. It requires an application and a fee. 1-year extension is granted. However, in Chapter 16, the amendments to Chapter 16 that you're considering today, it does specify the 4-year initial approval. It does mention the 2-year extension. It does not, however, mention the additional 1-year extension approvals. I think it would be prudent that if you believe that it's appropriate to continue granting those 1-year extensions, I'd like to see that put into the chapter section, applicable sections of Section 16. Pretty readily done, because under each of these approvals, each of these individual types of approvals, whether it be a template dwelling or a farm dwelling or that sort of thing, does have a timeline attached to it with the extension provisions. I think it's necessary. If those 1-year extensions are going to be utilized and granted, it needs to be located in Chapter 16, or at least that's my suggestion. Related to that, then, in the Chapter 14 section, 14097G, the 1-year extensions are allowed if the applicable criteria have not changed. That makes me a little bit nervous, because right now we're going through with the Planning Commission's changes to Chapter 16. Now the standards that would change the criteria to actually approve the dwelling aren't going to be changed by anything that I've seen thus far. However, there is consideration of some of the citing criteria being changed. Citing standards, citing criteria, whatever you might call that. What I think we need to be careful of, and I don't know if there's anything you can do with it today except keep it in mind, and as we go into Chapter 16, if we change the siting standard, let's say we have a 120-foot setback, 130-foot setback instead of a 100-foot setback, does that mean that you can't extend it because the criteria has changed? I would hope not, because it's simply a siting standard. It's not a siting that actually approves the dwelling. So I'd like you to consider that, maybe have a little bit of discussion with staff that could very well carry over into the Chapter 16 changes. The last issue is the revocation issue, and I'm quite concerned about that. I think you really need to spend a lot of time considering what you want to do there. This is kind of a new deal that you can, or the director can revoke an approval based on error, and that's all it says. Well, what is an error? That can really be, an open-ended error in what? Who made the error? Was it the applicant? Was it the county, or whatever? I contacted the. I don't think it needs to be there. I contacted the last planning director, next to the last planning director, Kent Howe, to ask him what the history was in errors. He said during his tenure as planning director, there was one revocation of a permit, and that revocation was based on misleading information provided by the applicant. And that's already in the code, should be there. If somebody lies and gets a permit based on falsehoods, then it ought to be revoked. But an error, and an error from what? I don't know. The whole purpose of having the notification of decisions and opportunity to appeal and final decision is so that once you get a permit, you go through that process, you got a permit, you don't have to worry about it. A revocation based on error could happen ultimately any time. It would seem to me that somebody comes in and says, well, look, this word was spelled wrong, or, what's an error? Bring something back forward that's settled, may even have different owners or that sort of thing. It's just way, way wide open. So I think there were a couple other, if we're going to deal with that, then let's look at what we're trying to cure here. And I know there has been a recent situation where a planning director revoked a permit based on an error. It started, however, with a ministerial decision, I believe, on a property line adjustment. It was made ministerial. That moved forward to probably a legal lot verification, and then ultimately a template dwelling approval. And it was found that ministerial decision was made in error. Just a mistake. And those things do happen over the years. But So it was revoked, and things died down. No big harm or foul. Other than that, there's one other that I'm aware of where some time ago, well, it wasn't that long ago, where there was a Measure 49 decision made to grant a dwelling on a 49 claim. Well, the situation was, if I understand it, is that you had we had a claimant for a 49 claim, was allowed one dwelling. He sold one of the parcels. The buyer says, "Why get the claim?" The seller says, "No, I'm retaining the claim." That wasn't even a land use decision. Ultimately, it got into land use arena because there had been a decision issued, but that's a civil matter. So I'm not seeing the need for that revocation by error. If there is, let's identify it and let's set some standards where it's clearly something that's pretty egregious. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you for the time and your attention. I just urge you to take your time like the Planning Commission did with all the issues that brought up by Bill Close, Land Watch, things I happen to say, and do it right.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. So I think we had somebody walk in after I grabbed the sign-up sheet. So, Bill, you want to make some comments during the public hearing here? We're still in the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. I have no notepad today, but two separate electronic devices. I sent you folks a short letter.
Bill, name it.
I'm sorry, Bill Close, 375 West 4th Street, Suite 204, Eugene. I have lots of clients that are interested in this, so I don't think I need to list them all right now, but quite legislative. I'd be here myself even if I didn't have any clients. It's great to be part of this tsunami of code improvement. It's a great effort. And I have been watching, this is the first time I've stood up in front of anybody and testified on Chapter 14 matter, but I have been watching it with great care and watching the improvements and kibitzing with all the other folks that have been talking to you. I put together a shopping list letter last night. I fought against my instinct to draft code language. You know, it's in my DNA. I want to do it, you know, because only I know how to draft it perfectly, and I realized it's premature, and what I did instead was just try to hit some issues that I think you ought to be thinking about, you and staff ought to be thinking about more. And so you have my list. I don't need to slug through every item. I'd like to hit a couple high points if I could. Number 2 on my list, we need to be more clear as to whether or not any appeal filed to the county board has to list all issues that they want to potentially take to LUBA, and whether or not they need to definitively explain that those issues were raised in the proceeding before the hearings official. Number 3, and this applies both in the context of an elective review process where you're being asked to grant review, and in the fast-tracked appeal where you're being asked to keep your hands off the matter. Does the county board have the right to inject its own issues into the appeal? There's no right answer. Some counties, the answer is no. Some counties, the answer is yes. I can see good reason to do it either way. But the code really needs to be very, very clear as to whether or not that can happen. Decades ago, I had a case in Douglas County where I filed the appeal, I believe, to the county board, and the hearings official had found 3 reasons for saying no to my church's request for a conditional use permit. It wasn't a popular church in the county at the time. And so I appealed those 3 reasons for saying no to the church to the county board, and the county board agreed with me that none of those reasons was a basis for saying no. And then they said, but we find another reason for saying no, and they said no to the church. I said, what? You know, how can I appeal to the county board to win on all my issues and still lose the church? And so that, we then had to go to LUBA, and LUBA said, well, it's okay. You know, it's their county. They can add issues to the shopping list of issues since they know. And so we went to the Court of Appeals, and Court of Appeals said, no, you can't do that. Or maybe it was the Supreme Court that said, no, you can't do that. At any rate, Smith versus Douglas County, one of the many Smith versus Douglas County cases, stands for the proposition that if the county code says that the issues on appeal are limited to the issues raised in the appeal statement, then in that situation, the county board has limited its own authority, and it can't add issues to the shopping list. It's not right or it's wrong. It's just what they did in that situation. So this board should think about whether or not, in the context of either an appeal you decide you want to hear, or in the case of a fast-track appeal where you're being asked to keep your hands off it, in either case you're going to get list issues, and you might say, well, this grabs our attention, but we want to add an issue over here. So if you want that authority, be very clear that you have that authority, and if you don't want it, be very clear it's not there. I was really shaken a bit by item number 6 in my letter, the question of modification of an application. I get what's happening here. Applications kind of morph as they go through the process because applicants are trying to chase the path to get to a yes, and they get nervous about negative staff reports and such, and things morph over time. And I can see the staff saying, well, we have a change. The applicant says, we want to chase the brass ring, and the staff saying, we're chasing a moving target. And I can understand the frustration. I think that the current draft language is a little hard on the applicants. Applicants always want to have the right to add conditions or suggest conditions that will mitigate the impacts and get the decision maker in a position where they can say yes. A lot of times applicants want to trim down, take some ornaments off the Christmas tree, to trim down the proposal so that the decision maker is more likely to find, yes, it meets the standards, so we can approve it. Does either of those situations, suggesting conditions or skinning down a site plan, does either of those situations amount to a modification, which potentially means the person has to go back and start from scratch? That would not be a good thing. I didn't ask if I had a time limit. Am I limited to less than an hour?
I gave Mike about 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay,
if you
I'll wrap it up.
Keep us in that range.
When I walked in, Mike was talking about the nightmare of revocation or suspension of decisions. I want to add my 2 cents to this. The provision that says revocations can be made based on errors in decisions made a long time ago is just a nightmare. We had a client involved in that situation a year and a half ago, and it took months and months and months to unwrap, and thousands of dollars, and there were people that are on the edge of starting litigation. What happens is somebody files an application, it's fully noticed, goes through the process, there's a decision based on a record, there might be a hearing, you get a final decision, and people make life changes based on that. They sell property, they get building permits, the next guy gets a building permit, the next guy buys the property and he's ready to apply for a building permit, and all of a sudden you get a notice in the mail that the decision's been revoked because of a mistake. And that creates an absolute train wreck. There are other reasons in there for revoking, and they're fine. But this one, where there's just a later in time decision that there was a legal or factual error made in a decision that was fully noticed and was fully litigated and reduced to a final decision, that is not something that should happen in the county. I would like to thank you for pulling from this draft of the code the language that ties the filing fee for a fast-track appeal through the board to the statutory $250 fee for getting the first hearing. That opens the door to some major leveling of the playing field and to reduction of the county subsidies of appeals, which we think is inappropriate. I know the staff's recommending to you, you ought to be thinking about bumping that from $250 to $1,000. Maybe double that would still amount to a 50% subsidy on these appeals. Last year there were, in 2017, there were 10 Lane County cases decided by LUBA. 8 of those were Land Watch versus Lane County cases. The other two are cases in the names of individuals who are represented by Land Watch's attorney. So you can speculate about what was going on there. We were involved in 7 of those 10 cases. So the point is, the deep pocket subsidy of the appeal track through the county board encourages more appeals. And that makes a lot of money for a lot of attorneys, including me, my firm, and including the Land Watch attorney, but it costs the county dearly. It costs the county to process those appeals, because it's about $4,000 a pop, and you only get $250. The county then needs to put together a LUBA record for each of those, and the LUBA record is never right, because by alleging errors. By the way, your LUBA records are phenomenal. They are really top drawer. I don't know of a local governing body that does a better job of putting together LUBA records. But there's always an objection to the record because it stops the clock, and you get to start the clock over again on briefing. That's the way it works, and all that's more expensive to the county. At any rate, so I think big picture is that the big subsidies on these appeal costs really facilitates more LUBA appeals, which profits the attorneys and costs more to the county. So I know you're working to bring all that back into balance. I just want you to encourage you to do that, and I appreciate your opening the door to doing that by this particular code amendment. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, does anyone else wish to address the board today during the public hearing? Kind of thought you might, Laurie.
Laurie Segall from Land Watch, Post Office Box 5347, Eugene. So we're the little fish here, not the big fish. Just want to remind you. We don't have an attorney. I don't have an attorney. We do have attorneys that will work for us and that we hire and that we pay an hourly rate to, but we don't have an attorney that's like a staff attorney. We're a little fish. On the issue of the permit extensions, it's in statute and rule that the dwelling approvals end after 1 2-year extension. The county has misconstrued the law in their practice of allowing these things to be extended indefinitely. I don't think the legislature expected forest template dwellings to be speculative real estate. That's what's happened. We have forest template dwellings in Lane County, dozens of them, that were approved 10 and 15 years ago. They continue to be extended every year. The conditions of approval are never met because the reason to get the permit for the dwelling wasn't to build it, it was to be able to sell the lot with the dwelling approval. And that is not what the legislature expected from forest template dwellings, and I think Measure 49 makes that pretty clear. This was something that people wanted. They wanted these forest template dwellings. Lane County lobbied the legislature for it in 1993 for the rules that we have now for them. So using the law in a way that having a practice that misconstrues the law, that has the effect of these permits being out there for 10 and 15 years is problematic. They're never out of the queue. They're never out of the queue. They're always moving back to the end. New applications are coming in, and they're moving back to the end of the queue. Talk about making more work for staff. Regarding the provision about if applicable criteria have not changed, that's another provision of state law. There's no discretion there. Statute and rule established that language, that for extensions, the applicable criteria could not have changed. And there's some additional language as well. That's not discretionary. Staff's not making that up. Regarding Land Watch being so expensive to the county, this issue really isn't on the table now. We're not talking about fees. But I just want to point out that the county has a practice of refunding planning action fees. So you apply for something, let's say it's $1,300. Let's say staff says they spent $1,000 worth of that permit fee, and then they realize that this thing might not be approvable or might have some problems or whatever, there's an opportunity for people to apply for a refund of the portion of the application fee that hasn't been utilized by staff time. I don't understand why that is. There's nothing, no one refunds any of my fees for anything I do normally. It just seems like staff does put out the time and has spent the time, and staff has a process for kind of stopping people from getting too far. They encourage meeting with staff up front. They have planners on duty to meet with people. And they try to have a process. They have land use compatibility studies, statements, that give people an idea of whether what they want to do is going to be able to, pass the test of approval or the criteria. And so this idea of refunding, staff has the discretion to do it. But when we talk about how much money Landwatch is costing the county, if that's even true, we need to talk about all the things that are costing the county money, not just one piece, which is appeals. Finally, I'll just say one other thing. Legal lot verifications are not noticed. In other words, you don't get notice of it, you get notice of decision. And I think the county, I'm just guessing, but there's easily 15 to 20 legal lot verifications decisions made every month. And we might appeal one or two, but you can't comment on these things without appealing them, and they're not without effect. There's a reason people want these legal lot verifications. It's not so that they can convey it. You're allowed to convey property that's not a legal lot. Law allows that. They want legal lot verifications because they're going to end up as forest template dwellings. Lane County approves 3 times more forest template dwellings than almost any other county, according to the DLCD statistics. And as I mentioned at the beginning, they're not all being realized. So they're ending up in the queue. We have this huge amount of forest template dwellings, both being applied for, approved, and being put on hold for years and years. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Laurie. Is there anyone else that wants to speak on Ordinance 1802? There'll be, I guess, another opportunity in the continued public hearing. If there's no other people that want to speak, I will entertain a motion about continuing the hearing. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So at this time, I'd like to move approval of the second reading and public hearing and continue this to a third reading and public hearing for April 10th at 1:30 p.m. in Harris Hall.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve the second reading and continue the public hearing and have a third reading on April 10th at 1:30 p.m. time certain by Commissioner Lycan, seconded by Commissioner Williams, and a question from Commissioner Stevens.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask staff, in the letter that was submitted by Landwatch, they said Landwatch believes these amendments regarding Lane Code 14.0906 are inconsistent with OAR 660-033-01405A and B and 6, in that the proposed amendment to Lane Code seems to apply to one-year extensions for residential development. And under the state, as I understand it, it's a state administrative rule, the residential development's only allowed for a single extension of 2 years. That seems like a pretty direct conflict between the draft and the comments. And is that something that is appealable? In other words, if the board decides to go with the language as proposed, and the opponents say it's in conflict with the state administrative rule, is that something that people have a right to challenge? And is that challenged? Where is that challenge? The Land Use Board of Appeals, where is that challenge?
Yes, that would be, well, yeah, I guess you can file any appeal, but that would be an issue that would be appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals, if anywhere.
And do you think that they are incorrect, and that's why the county's position is what it is?
It's an issue that I don't know that staff has considered, or at least I don't know that we received an objection to the language until this letter came in.
Okay.
So I don't know that it's been thoroughly researched. I pulled the rule that Mr. Malone refers to. I don't think I agree with his analysis. The rule, in short, talks about an application approval being good for 2 years. This is non-residential, everything but residential. Good for 2 years with an opportunity for, it says, one extension for up to 12 months if you meet certain criteria. And then it further says additional 1-year extensions, plural, may be authorized where applicable criteria for the decision have not changed. You step down another paragraph in this rule, then it says basically, oh, by the way, for residential development on resource land, the permit's good for 4 years and an extension for 2. And then it doesn't talk about whether there's any limitation on additional exceptions, extensions after that. And so the rule's not perfectly clear on that, but I think the point of the rule really is to create a distinction between the length of how long the permit is good for between residential development and non-residential development, not to limit the outward extension of that can be granted. I don't think
Wouldn't it save the county money if that's a theme here? Wouldn't it save the county money to not put in these extensions? They seem to be, since the process is complicated, people apply and they don't follow through, or they can't follow through, and then extensions are granted and the cost continues for all involved, especially the county.
I don't think I'm qualified to weigh in on the cost.
I mean, are there numbers of these that have been extended?
Sure there are, but.
Yeah, Commissioner Sorensen, we could provide those numbers. We do receive a fair number of them because obviously conditions change. We saw a lot of extensions through the recession when people thought they were going to build a home and then things bottom out and they needed a few extra years to do so. So we could provide those numbers. I will say that we do charge a fee for those extensions, which is based on our fee study for cost recovery. So I don't know that it's a loss of revenue to the county to provide those extensions.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then a more general question I have is that we received these 2 letters from Mr. Close and Landwatch. I'm interested in knowing whether, as a part of the preparation for the next proposal, you could go through there and see if there's any harmony or any disagreement between the two. I'm kind of hoping there's harmony, but there might not be. There might be disagreement, and I'm wondering if that could be part of what you do in the ensuing.
Yes, absolutely. So we'll more fully review those comments and review them for consistency with state law, and then provide a response in the April 10th supplemental board packet.
Okay, and then what is the status of the discussion of changing the fees for land use? I know that's not part of the record of this proceeding, but what is the status of it?
So if I can clarify, are you referring to just the appeal process or just fees in general for land use?
I would just say fees in general for the division. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So right now,
Just very quickly, the board directed us, and we'll be going to the Finance and Audit Committee with the appeal proposal and may also talk about fees in general. That's scheduled for next month for April. And then I think we're scheduled tentatively to come back to the board to have you make the decision and look at the fee the fee proposal at that time.
Okay, so it's going to Finance and Audit, and then after it goes to Finance and Audit, come back to the board prior to the Budget Committee's adoption of the proposed budget.
Well, if that happens after June 16th, I'm not sure what the Budget Committee schedule is.
No, the Budget Committee typically will end in May, and typically the board then will take the budget over from the Budget Committee at around the transition of June to May to June.
We weren't trying to time it specifically around the Budget Committee discussion. This isn't something we're proposing for this year's budget.
Oh, it's not?
It is not.
I see. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So any discussion of the motion that's on the floor, which is to approve the second reading and set the third reading and continue public hearing for April 10th? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So we have an additional item on the schedule, but I believe we need to wait till 2:30 to start that item because we're waiting for somebody from Junction City to show up, and they were expecting us to take 60 minutes, and I think they also had a conflict early in the afternoon. Sarah, is our Junction City person on their way, or should we take a short recess?
He's on his way. I apologize. He's had a conflict come up. He's trying to get here as soon as he can. So if the board is willing and able, that would be helpful. I can also give you a couple of updates from economic development if you're wanting to hear that as well. So it's up to you.
I think we could do that if it pleases the board, seeing we haven't had an opportunity to hear from you in a while. And I think you have some new staff you'd like to tell us about, too.
Well, yes, I happen to have some new staff. You may have seen yesterday's press release, and I apologize that Austin isn't here today. He came in yesterday morning on his first day, did his abbreviated employee orientation, and we promptly sent him off to some training with our Mackenzie River partners, and so he is there doing that training today. Clearly has hit the ground running. So you likely saw in the press release, Austin held a similar position in California, management analyst within a community development department. He brings with him, a really great skill set, level of experience related to community and economic development, and so we're very excited to have him on board and looking forward to the good work that we'll be doing together, particularly in our rural communities, as that will be his primary focus. So that was the big announcement. Beyond that, you've heard Commissioner Lyken speak a couple of times today, actually, about something he's calling traded sector strategies. Sector strategies is a coordinated opportunity that we've been pretty heavily involved in for a number of years now in conjunction with our partners across the region, in particular Lane Workforce Partnership and cities of Eugene and Springfield and other rural communities as well. Things that have come out of sector strategies include the placement of a dedicated advocacy position for Technology Association of Oregon here in the southern Willamette Valley. You all likely know Matt Sayer. So that was year one. Year two moved on to food and beverage. We now have a dedicated food and beverage advocate. Micah Elkanen is his name, and he's doing great work specific to the food and beverage sector. Now we are in year three, and Lane County, in our program, along with our partners at the City of Springfield and Lane Workforce Partnership, have kicked off the Wood Products Sector Strategy Initiative. And so we're in the middle of that. In November, we had the opportunity to convene a group of CEOs from our major wood products companies here in Lane County. And they were asked to be brutally honest with their feedback of the work going on here in Lane County and how we could be more helpful. And they did not hold back, which was exactly what we were wanting. And so we've gotten some really great feedback from them. We've taken that and we've moved it forward and developed several committees that are now addressing those topics. Commissioner Lyken chairs the Advocacy and Regulation Committee. And we are reconvening the wood products industry partners on April 2nd to report back to them the progress that we've made to date. And I'm happy to report that there is some progress being made within those topic areas. And then we'll continue forward and hopefully replicate a structure similar to what the technology sector created and the food and beverage sector created. So very excited about that particular work. Are there any questions related to that?
Any questions?
I think this is related. I'm not quite sure. I'm just curious about the use of the term publicly traded sector. Isn't that usually mean big business? I mean, is that a euphemism for big multi-shareholder corporations that I think you have to be 250 shareholders to be publicly traded? Isn't that what that is? And how does that really fit into our idea of working with people that are trying to build innovation? They're trying to build a better mousetrap. They're working out of their garage like Sequential or out of their trunk like Nike or whatever. They're trying to build a business and it becomes a bigger business and more successful, but it starts out very small. And it's just one, business administration major selling shoes out of the trunk of a car at track meets,
Sure.
That becomes something bigger.
Right.
Well, and the sequential biofuels, it started right over here in Whitaker with a bunch of people experimenting in their garage with a variety of ghoulish substances that they eventually perfected into a business. And we've got thousands, maybe hundreds, thousands of examples in our great work with Rain and other. So I'm just kind of curious what is meant by let's work on publicly traded sector, or when really the innovation comes from within our community. Florence, they just had a big thing in Florence. That's been a huge thing.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's been going on in Eugene for at least a decade. So I just want to hear about that.
So when I refer to something as traded sector, I don't necessarily say publicly traded sector. Traded sector, in terms of how we operate, is a company, a business who is producing or manufacturing something here in our region and then exporting that outside of our region and frankly our state, potentially internationally, to bring in that new wealth coming into the community. So I would say the vast majority of the businesses here in Lane County are actually considered small business, less than 250 employees. I believe that's, or maybe it's 500. I believe that's the definition used by the Small Business Association. And so the vast majority of our companies here in Lane County fit that small business criteria. So I would say that, clearly the majority of the businesses that we are working with are actually small businesses and are in that innovation sector. You mentioned Rain in Florence, and that brings up a great point, Commissioner Sorensen. We, the board, recently assisted with some funding to continue those innovation and entrepreneurship efforts in other parts of rural Lane County. So Oak Ridge and Lowell were the next iteration of that funding, where that funding was provided. And Rain has been working with those innovation and entrepreneurship groups in those communities. I can tell you that the kickoff meeting that was held in Oak Ridge a few weeks back, it generated 52 attendees with 10 different pitches. So clearly the entrepreneurship community is alive and well even in rural Lane County, and that's really important for you all to know as you've been making those investments. Does that help answer your question?
I guess when I hear, a term like, traded sector or public company, publicly traded company, publicly held company, publicly listed company, public corporation. To me, that's a business entity that's already well on its way, that has,
Mixing terms.
yeah, I think people want to know, what's this got to do with us? The answer is, are we putting money into that type of business? Or are we putting money into the mom, pop, hipster, whatever person who's an entrepreneur? Whether they denominate themselves an entrepreneur or not, they're trying to make money off of their idea. They're trying to build a better mousetrap. They're trying to do something faster, cheaper, and more efficiently than someone else. And I want to know, just because of your work, whether we're putting money into the big companies or into the local entrepreneurs. That's really what this has got to do.
So I would say that we're almost exclusively putting our money into local entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Let me, Chair Bosevich, Commissioner Sorensen, it's the type of business, it's not the size of business. So if it's the type that can one day be traded, that is where we're choosing to focus.
Okay.
So don't think of it as they need to be there already, but if they have the ability to be a traded company at some point in the future, we want to help get them there.
And I think one of the things that's confusing is when we refer to traded sector, it's the product they produce is being traded, not their stock.
Yes.
So that's where you're getting a little confusion about publicly traded and all that stuff. No, that's not what we're talking. The definition of a traded sector is industry sectors whose outputs could be traded internationally or potentially traded internationally. They don't even have to be traded internationally yet. But so it's like there's a little company that just moved out of somebody's garage and into the business park in Florence that was making replacement cylinders for high-end car convertibles, that raise and lower and it was started by a guy who was, an engineer or machinist by trade in his garage, basically, because he was tired of the quality and the cost of replacement parts. They weren't any better than the original. In fact, they were usually lower quality. So he set out to make those out of a higher quality material and at a lower price. And it's caught on, and it's potentially something that can be traded internationally.
I think,
and that's the definition of a traded sector business. But it was 5 guys in his garage when he moved into the business park. So that's the entrepreneur, exactly what we're talking about.
I think that's a really great example. I would offer also Glory Bee, a company that all of you are, I think, very familiar with. It was started in the mid-'70s in a garage, and they are now a traded sector company because of where the products that they make and where they're distributed.
And it's the potential to be traded, not just whether they're traded now internationally. So it's the good or the service they're delivering. So it even includes, some of our, what's the education nuggets, CBT nuggets?
CBT nuggets.
Yeah, where it's software.
Yep, absolutely.
That's traded internationally. So.
You mean Glory Bee has gone beyond Bethel?
They did. Newsflash, Commissioner.
But I want to welcome Jordan from Junction City here. And we'll get on to our originally scheduled agenda item, which is item 13A, which is Order 1803-1309, in the matter of expanding the Harrisburg Enterprise Zone and to include additional industrial land located on the east side of Highway 99 south of Junction City. And Sarah, I guess you want to start us off and tell us what we're up to here.
Yes, thank you, Chair and Commissioners. And I appreciate Jordan making his way here today. I don't think we're going to take too much of your time here, but wanted to give you the opportunity to comment on this matter. As you mentioned, this is an opportunity to expand the Harrisburg Enterprise Zone. Yes, Harrisburg. That is the name of the zone. The Harrisburg City Manager is the zone manager, but it does extend down into Junction City and Lane County. And so, therefore, we require your vote on this matter today. The area that you all will be needing to be concerned with includes property that is south of First Avenue and on the east side of Highway 99 down to Meadowview Road. And I have maps that I can provide you so that you can have a visual. Thank you. So what I did was, we're in the process of getting a new map created. It's not quite here yet, so we're going to look at some plan designation and zone maps because they actually pretty clearly articulate the areas that we're talking about. So on the zoning designation map on properties that are south of First Avenue, down to Meadowview Road, you'll see that the majority of them on the east side of Highway 99 within the urban growth boundary are not in a color. They're white. They're not shaded in a color. And then on the plan designation map, you'll see where those same properties, they're actually all filled in an industrial designation. Those are the primaries that were the properties that we're concerned about here today because they are clearly within the urban growth boundary of Junction City, but not quite annexed, and so therefore under your jurisdiction. The zone, you are all very familiar with enterprise zone, and so I'm sure you're well aware of what this means in terms of expanding the zone. It is industrial property and potentially developable, and so we want to make sure that we have all of the economic development tools available for use if potential development comes in. And so that's really all I have for you at this time. I don't know if Jordan has anything additional to add.
No, I think you pretty clearly wrapped that up. Just this is the fourth of four meetings in order to adopt the resolutions necessary to get that up to Salem for approval. We've gone through the Junction City, the Harrisburg, and the Lynn County process. And
Jordan, can you pull the mic closer to you?
Certainly, yeah.
I'm not hearing you through the sound system, which means you're not getting recorded as part of our minutes.
Perfect. Yeah. So what I was saying is that this is the fourth of four hearings required in order to get this process approved at the state. As Sarah mentioned, we don't have a map quite ready. I've commissioned that map through LCOG and hoping to have that as part of our submittal package going forward, hopefully including the blessing from this body here. I'm happy to answer any questions as to how this was initiated, but basically this is brought forth by the development review approval for the Northern Gold Foods project on the southern end of the urban growth boundary along Meadowview Road in 99 as part of the Grain Millers development. So they're hoping to take advantage of this process as well.
So any questions, we're happy to be available for that.
Sure. Commissioner Lycan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question is, within the enterprise zone designation within Junction City, the Junction City piece, any idea how the acreage that would be encompassed within the enterprise zone?
Currently, we're looking at 1.7 acres, and it's heading up towards 2.2, square miles. It's part of that taxing district notice. Should have been included in your packet there.
I was looking for the. So can you repeat that again?
So it looks like we're including an additional 0.7 square miles.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a nice chunk of land.
Correct.
And what are there services to the land now, or would that have to be something if a project came in that services would have to be brought in?
So as part of the Oregon State Hospital and future prison site, those services were extended south too, and I believe as part of that Northern Gold Foods project, they'll be going to and through as well. So, which
is what I thought, but just wanted to make sure. So, and the proximity to I-5 from there is.
So, what is it? Maybe a mile to Beltline, and then another couple of miles to I-5 on Beltline. Mm-hmm.
As the crow flies, I believe that these enterprise zones have to be within a 15-mile sort of diameter, and I believe that there's a little bit on the east side of 5 from Harrisburg, so we're sort of sitting within that range at least.
So it'd be fairly easy then for truck traffic then to navigate to I-5 from that site.
Absolutely, as well as the BNSF Railway, as well as the Union Pacific Railway.
So in other words, when the new reload facility is built out in Lynn County, it'd be easy for a truck to get there, then obviously load onto UP or BNSF.
Potentially, yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Commissioner Sorensen.
So I guess I want you to back up a bit. These maps of Junction City, what do they have to do with Harrisburg?
So,
I mean, they're really nice maps of Junction
they're
City.
beautiful maps, aren't they?
They really are. And the scale is on there, and the legends are great.
Right.
And as a former cartographer, I would just say, man, these are really good maps. In the olden days, we'd have to draw these with actual pens.
Right.
And
Yes.
so to see them produced by computers is really exciting.
Phenomenal thing.
It is.
Yes.
That's great. But what's that got to do with what we're talking about?
So the only reason why we reference Harrisburg is because this enterprise zone spans from Harrisburg down south into Junction City, and it's formally named the Harrisburg Enterprise Zone.
Oh, so the Harrisburg Enterprise Zone consists of what we might call Harrisburg and Junction City.
Correct.
It's a co-administered zone.
Co-administered, and what we're seeing here is the Junction City part of the
You're seeing
enterprise zone?
Yes, yes.
We're not seeing the Harrisburg part?
No.
Okay. Are they connected? Or are they separate? Is it one big enterprise zone?
They're specific properties within Harrisburg, specific properties within Junction City. In fact, this Dog Lake portion that we're asking you to approve today is in addition to the existing parcels that are included in that Harrisburg enterprise zone.
And that's the map that shows the west side of the Highway 99 in purple.
The east side, correct?
East side.
East side, excuse me, east side. Well, it's west if you look this way. Okay. So,
As a former cartographer.
yeah, the other west. So on the east side of 99 north, 99, the combined 99 before it splits, that's all in the industrial. Is that near the hospital? Where is it from the hospital?
So if you'll see the blue zoning and blue designation, that's the hospital.
That's
site,
the hospital.
including the future prison site as well.
Okay, and so the idea is, in very broad terms, big industrial area just to the east of 99.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
I'm just smiling about history. I'm thinking back in 1997, when 96, 97, when the state first announced that they were considering a prison site out just past Meadowview Road. And I remember about a 4-hour meeting we had at the Eugene City Council. We were talking about the provisions that the city of Eugene would place on that prison site if they were to put it this close to Eugene's UGB. And I mentioned at the time that, if we mess around, if we don't accommodate the appropriate development inside this large metropolitan area, which is Eugene, then the outerlying cities will begin to creep toward Eugene. And I'm looking at Aubrey Lane right now. I'm looking at Meadowview right now. And Sid, I don't know how far you can hit a 9-iron. But, you say, how far is it from Junction City, Eugene? Well, I think the sign says 12 miles. It's more like 300 yards.
I believe you asked me that question last time.
Yeah, and that was before you were considering this eastern section. So, it's, I think, bounce it down Highway 99, you can hit a long drive, but it really is, and I am absolutely in favor of this. This is a great use of the available development available land and the prevailing attitude toward facilitating appropriate development. But I'd like to send a message to those Eugene City councilors, and I'll give you their names. Watch out, guys, because Junction City will grab it. Well, guess what?
We certainly will.
Guess what? That's all.
Thank you.
It's going to happen from the south, too. It might happen from the east. Probably not from the east.
Yeah, I know we don't have an official map, but the order does have attached to it an exhibit that has the description of the expansion and lists the actual tax lot map and parcels for the expansion. So, the actual order, doesn't necessarily have to have the map with it.
No.
We're actually in.
Right, we're good because we do have that formal legal description.
And I'm not sure if you received a copy with the color.
Yeah, we did, with the red colors, and the red, I assume, is the additional parcels.
That's correct, yeah.
Which represents the 0.7 square miles.
Yes.
So, yeah, I fully support us moving ahead with this. There's some great opportunity there with the grain miller's site. We're just really happy with the partnership we've had with Junction City so far, in helping out with, the Winnebago coming back into the Country Coach site, to the, expansion of Cosmos Creations. We've partnered with Junction City on several economic development activities so far. You guys were great partners in trying to lobby the legislature over the state hospital, and also keeping their budget up there. So, but you guys have been a success story for Lane County. And there's a reason why you're the fastest growing city in Lane County. Some people don't realize that, but that Junction City is the fastest growing by percent of population city in Lane County. And it's because of this great, work you guys are doing to, thinking about business is good. Expanding business is better. And you guys are doing a great job with that. And the number of jobs we've added in the Junction City area between the state hospital, Winnebago, Cosmos, and the other businesses that are expanding around that, the work that Guarantee's done in adding their travel center and the redo of their whole, the whole dealership. There's some wonderful work being done there by them. It's just, it's an exciting little thing, and this little piece of us approving this and being the fourth of four, and that's because you had to get Harrisburg, Junction City, and Lynn County all to approve it first, right? If I got the other three entities.
You're correct.
So, I feel like, we get to be the tail, but that gets to wag the dogs. We're happy to be that, and I'm really pleased that you guys are coming to us for this, so we can maybe get another opportunity for Junction City and grain millers, and 75 more jobs added to that plethora that you've developed over the last 10 years. I mean, just you guys are a great success story. I'm looking forward to the great things you guys are doing. So. With that, are there any further questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion. Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move approval of Order 1803-1309, the matter of expanding the Harrisburg Enterprise Zone to include additional industrial land located on the east side of Highway 99 south of Junction City. Is that right? East side of 99 south? Yeah, that's right.
Second.
I had to think about that.
I'm sorry.
It's on the west side here.
Moved by Commissioner Lykin, seconded by Commissioner Williams to approve the order. Any discussion to the motion? Commissioner Lykin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So real quickly, this really works so well with when we talk about regional economic development, because if you think about our major regional partners along with Lane, are Lane, Lynn, and Benton County. The three counties right here. So this really works so well into the future opportunities that will not only happen for tax base here locally or in Lynn County, but it's the jobs being created, because the reality is with a major metropolitan center, many of those jobs created in areas like, for instance, here or in Lynn County or in Benton County would come from here. And so it's really exciting, and I just want to say thank you and I think Chair Bozovich, who obviously this is his district and is very passionate about it, as we can tell. I just really want to say thank you in the work that you've done, and on your end, what Chair Bozovich has been doing as well on that end, and I think it really works out quite well. So thank you for that.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Commissioner Farr.
Thanks. This is my former legislative district, so I've pounded the pavement there. But I call this process lovingly Envision Junction City.
Careful. Easy.
Doesn't want to. Please don't settle in with that. Any other discussion of the motion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you kindly.
Thank you for making the drive down.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, commissioners, for your flexibility in entertaining my updates.
Oh, we appreciate the updates. And now we understand what traded sector means.
Great. My day is complete.
Of which, grain millers and the addition of that, not only is it one of our food sector expansions, it is also traded sector.
Yeah.
So we're doing good things.
Good things.
So that brings us towards the end of our agenda and to review of assignments. I think we just have the one.
Chair Bosevich, Commissioners, yes, and my notes are in Steve Mokrahysky's handwriting. It's my understanding that you're requesting a meeting of the Planning Commission Subcommittee, and that is Chair Bosevich and Commissioner Williams, for the purpose of appointments.
Yeah, interviewing the potential appointees for Planning Commission and making a recommendation to the full board for an appointment.
Then we have captured that one item.
Any other items that were missed from today? Is there any other business today? I will remind the commissioners that we have a work session starting at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning here in Harris Hall, and we want to be done by 11 because the city has the work session in here at lunchtime, so we're going to move efficiently tomorrow morning, I hope. But it's going to be an interesting agenda tomorrow morning. So we are adjourned until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock.